Friday mornings at the office were usually lighter. People dressed down, the air smelled like coffee and optimism, except today. Today there was a tension in the room you couldn't ignore. I walked into the conference room, holding my flash drive like it was gold, because it was. Months of work, strategy, branding, late nights, all sitting in my hand. I had rehearsed this presentation a dozen times. Every slide, every sentence. My brother, Scott, leaned against the glass wall, sipping his coffee. He nodded. "Need help loading the files?" I hesitated, just for a moment, but I nodded. Sure. We'd had our differences growing up, a lot of them, but somehow we'd ended up working in the same department, same company. He'd always found a way to charm his way into things. I had to earn mine. The room started filling up. Co-workers, my manager, and then him. The client's VP walked in, power suit, quiet shoes. All eyes turned to me. This was my moment. I plugged in my flash drive. Opened the folder, empty. The screen, projecting to the room, showed a list of blank folders. Just nothing. There was an awkward pause. Someone coughed, a few nervous chuckles. I stared, clicking into folders back and forth, hoping something would appear. My brother leaned over. "You sure you saved the final version?" His voice was calm, loud enough for everyone to hear, but his eyes, there was a flicker, like he enjoyed it. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. The client glanced at his watch. "We'll have to reschedule. We'll be in touch." He was gone in less than a minute. My boss's jaw was clenched. "How does something like this happen, Madeline?" I tried to explain, but my voice felt distant. Scott shrugged, sipping his coffee again. "Could be user error. Happens." He smirked. I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled, tight and tired. Behind me, someone whispered, "She's too emotional to lead." Always has been. I stood there, years of hard work evaporating, late nights, sacrifices, mentoring others, all undone in 10 minutes. And the worst part? It wasn't just professional, it was personal. This was my brother. Flash. I remembered being 8, watching him lie to our parents about the broken lamp. I got grounded. He got ice cream. I blinked, trying to hold it together. "Don't cry," I whispered to myself. Not here. Not for him. I walked out of that room without saying another word. The hallway felt longer than usual. My heels clicked on the tile floor like drum beats in a funeral procession. No one made eye contact, not even Emily, who usually greeted me with a smile. Back at my desk, I sat down slowly. My assistant mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded, but my throat was locked. I couldn't swallow. Ping. HR. "Can we chat for a sec?" I walked in, sat down across from the director. She asked a few vague questions I answered automatically, but in my mind I was back at that USB. Scott had touched it earlier this week. "Just scanning for bugs," he'd said, friendly, casual. I had thanked him. Now my hands trembled. It wasn't a virus. It was him. I texted my husband. "Something happened. I'll explain tonight." Then the voice came. Quiet, familiar. "You trusted him again. You knew better." Back at my desk, I stared blankly at the screen. The office buzzed around me like nothing had happened, like the ground hadn't just fallen from under my feet. I looked over at Scott. He was laughing with someone from sales, carefree, like none of it mattered. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Madeline, this is Tom from Kessler and Reed. We've seen your pitch decks. Impressive work." My brain barely processed the compliment. "We're looking to bring someone like you on board. Something quieter, better paid, less politics. We'd start with a $100,000 signing bonus." I didn't respond right away. He continued, "Think about it. No family ties to trip you up?" I looked back at Scott, still laughing, like he'd won something. I turned my chair slowly, letting the idea sit. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. Instead, I whispered to myself, "You have no idea what's coming." The apartment was quiet when I walked in that night. Not the soft, peaceful kind of quiet. the kind that echoes your own thoughts back to you. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag by the door, and headed straight to the living room. No music, no TV, just the glow of the city bleeding through the curtains and the weight of what had happened earlier. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on the edge of the couch, fingers steepled under my chin, and replayed everything, each smirk, each word. The moment my screen showed nothing but digital silence, and yet my breathing was even, my mind clear. I leaned forward, reached under the low shelf, and slid open a small drawer behind the books. Inside was a matte black SSD drive labeled in sharp silver ink. Dead Man folder. Most people would assume it was a joke. Not me. Years ago, I learned the hard way at another firm with a different betrayal. I'd made a habit then, every client file, every pitch deck, every key draft, duplicated, encrypted, and backed up weekly. I plugged the drive into my laptop. Password set, encryption unbroken. Everything was there, every visual, every slide, every footnote. I let out a long breath I didn't realize I was holding. You never get to write my downfall, Torin, I whispered. I own my narrative. Click. I opened the file directory. My fingers moved quickly now, muscle memory. I started printing selected slides, watermarking everything with timestamps and metadata. Then I forwarded 3 PDFs to a contact in legal. No questions asked, just subject line, timestamp verification. But I wasn't going to expose him, not yet. Revenge? No, that would be too simple. What I wanted was leverage, quiet leverage, the kind that sits in your back pocket waiting. I closed the laptop and left the drive plugged in. I would sleep with it next to me. Sunday came and went like a shadow. Every week, Mum expected us all at her place for dinner. Family time, she called it, as if we hadn't all learned to perform for her approval. This week, I didn't even pretend. I sent a text. Can't make it, work deadline. It wasn't a lie, it just wasn't the truth either. I walked the Echo Park Lake instead, jacket zipped up, hands buried in my pockets, watching the ducks skim the water. My mind drifted to all the Sunday dinners before. Torin, always the golden boy. Every time he cracked a sly joke at my expense, Mum would laugh. He doesn't mean it, she'd say. Dad stayed silent, always did. I remembered the Christmas I got the scholarship letter. I hadn't even opened my mouth before Torin announced it first, claimed he helped me polish the essay. Mum clapped, Dad smiled. I sat there, choking on my own pride. When people ignore your pain long enough, they stop seeing it at all. That night, the walk was long enough to make peace with the anger, even if it still lived under my ribs. I wasn't sad, I was sharpened. By Monday morning, I was back at my desk, coffee in one hand, purpose in the other, an email pinged. I didn't recognize the sender until I opened it. Tom Keller, Kessler and Reed. Subject, formal offer, $100,000 signing bonus, full creative control, remote flexibility, and most importantly, 0 ties to Torin or his team. I didn't smile, I didn't cheer, I just forwarded it to Professor Willard, my mentor from undergrad. Subject, am I running or leveling up? His reply came fast, just one line. Depends, do you want revenge or resurrection? I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I typed, both. I started compiling my resignation, drafting notes, updating my portfolio links, but I didn't hit send. Instead, I pulled out the tulip brooch from the drawer, Mum's old gift. I hadn't worn it in years. It had always been a quiet token to myself, a signal that when I chose to move, it would matter. I pinned it inside my bag lining, not on display, just close enough to feel. Across the office, Torin was at his desk, leaning back like he had nothing in the world to fear. By midday, I saw him stiffen. He clicked into an email he clearly wasn't meant to receive. Someone had forwarded him one of my legal watermarked files. I could tell the second his jaw tightened. He stared at the screen for a while, then stood, phone to his ear. We might have a problem. He was right. Tuesday morning came soft and grey. I was driving through Silver Lake, windows halfway down, that quiet kind of Los Angeles air where the city hasn't decided yet if it's going to burn or breathe. A podcast was playing, background noise while I made my way to a design supplier. I wasn't even listening, not really, until one of the hosts laughed and said, "That's what you get when you assume the deck is stacked in your favor. Always flip the last card." That sentence, that exact phrasing, my hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles paling. 3 years ago, Torrin had said the same thing, word for word, after a meeting where he pitched my concept to a client, before I had a chance to speak. He turned to me afterward, grinned like it was a joke. "You hesitated. I flipped the last card." Back then, I swallowed it, told myself he didn't mean harm, that keeping the family peace was more important than winning every round. Now I saw it clearly. It wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern. I pulled over beside a meter that blinked, expired, fished a notebook from my passenger seat and scribbled, "He's done this before. He'll do it again." That wasn't bitterness. It was strategy. I wasn't building a grudge. I was building a case. Late afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house, just long enough to drop off Mum's prescription refill. The front door was open, screen door closed, the way she always left it. Inside, the hum of the TV and the scent of chicken broth. She was in the kitchen complaining about a neighbour's tree roots while I placed the bag on the counter. Torrin wasn't home yet, or so I thought. Then his phone buzzed. It was lying near the fruit bowl, screen lit up. I didn't mean to look, but I did. One message, previewed in plain sight. Did she take the bait? No name, just a sender I didn't recognize. My pulse thudded. I didn't touch the phone, but the phrase stuck in my head like a bad song. That night, after dinner was over and Mom had gone on about her roses, I sat on my couch, laptop on my knees, and searched the name on LinkedIn. Mid-level strategist. Works in Torrin's division. Everything clicked. This wasn't just a careless act or brotherly rivalry. This was planned. He had help. And it wasn't just about sabotaging a presentation. It was about positioning me as unstable, unreliable, removing me cleanly from any claim. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I wrote the sender's name down. Then I underlined it 3 times. The next morning, I met Lara at a coffee shop downtown. We'd planned it last week. Before any of this blew up, I thought I'd cancel, but showing up felt like taking back something. She was already sipping her espresso when I arrived, red lipstick on a white cup. We talked small for a bit. Then she said offhandedly, "You know my brother emptied my college savings account my senior year? Claimed it was an accident." Mum believed him, said I was being dramatic. I didn't speak at first. I just stared at the steam rising from my mug. Then I said quietly, "I think I've forgiven things that were never apologized for." She raised an eyebrow. "Forgiveness without accountability? That's just enabling." The words hit like a slap I didn't see coming. I had spent my whole life shielding Torrin from consequences, making excuses, absorbing the blow so no one else had to flinch. I looked at Lara, then past her, through the cafe window where people strolled by like nothing in the world was wrong. When I stood to leave, my shoulders felt different, like armor instead of weight. That night, I opened the closet in my guest room, pulled out my old college laptop from a box of cables and dusty textbooks, charged it, waited. It booted slow, like waking a memory I wasn't sure I wanted to relive. There it was, a folder named Not Yet. I clicked, screenshots, email threads, meeting notes, a draft HR complaint, never submitted, labeled, dated, annotated in red. He'd done this before. Back then, I told myself the timing was off, the politics too risky. Now it was different. "You didn't destroy my work, Torrin," I whispered, scrolling through each file. "You just built my evidence." The screen lit my face as I sat there, still, and everything I thought I'd buried started breathing again. I woke up before the sun, the room still cloaked in that hushed, grey silence that comes just before the city stirs. I sat up slowly, not because I was tired, but because everything in me felt heavy. My chest, my thoughts, even my hands. I stared at the ceiling and went over it again, every word I'd say to Torin if I had 5 minutes alone with him. 5 uninterrupted minutes. I pictured his face, the smug grin, the faux concern. My voice in that imaginary scene was steady, sharp, but in reality, I said nothing. I kept silent. Again, I glanced toward my dresser where the tulip tram pin rested, tucked into the edge of a small jewelry tray. It used to feel like something elegant. Today it looked like a weight, a reminder, or a warning. My phone buzzed beside me. Lara. Thinking of you. You okay? I stared at the message but didn't type a word. I wasn't ready to say I was okay. I wasn't ready to say I wasn't. I just needed to breathe without someone watching me for signs of collapse. I got up, made coffee, and sat by the window. The city was stretching, lights flickering off in apartments, buses crawling past like tired animals. Everything moving forward as if the day before hadn't existed, as if nothing had shattered. When silence is all you've ever known, I whispered to no one. Making noise feels dangerous. When I got to the office, the building felt colder than usual, or maybe I was. Some people said hello, others avoided eye contact. I couldn't tell who pitied me and who had played along. Torin spotted me as I walked in. "You're early," he said, holding out a coffee. "Peace offering." I didn't even glance at the cup. "I already had one." He smirked, shrugged, walked off. I sat at my desk and turned on my monitor. Just then, a colleague leaned over, voice low. "Heard about yesterday. That's rough." I nodded like I appreciated the concern, but my face didn't move beyond that. I couldn't afford to. In my inbox, a new message. Internal memo. Project leadership shift. I clicked, read. Torin had reassigned key segments of our campaign, his rationale, to streamline efficiency in light of recent inconsistencies. Inconsistencies, that's what he called sabotage. No warning, no meeting, just a reorg memo dressed as professionalism. I didn't slam anything, I didn't storm out. Instead, I opened a private drive and began moving every relevant file out of the shared folders. Every outline, sketch, timestamp, and message I still had. Quietly, completely, I wasn't going to be caught without proof again. Around lunchtime, my phone rang. "Hi, sweetie," my mum said, voice softer than usual. "Are you coming to dinner tonight?" I paused. "No," I said. "I have work." She hesitated. "But it's tradition." "Tradition doesn't protect people, Mum. It hides them." Silence on the line. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her wanting to say more, to explain, to defend. I didn't wait. I ended the call. No slamming, no crying, just done. Real family doesn't let you get thrown under a bus and call it just a misunderstanding. Real family stands up. That thought echoed as I sat back down. My hands didn't shake this time. My decision was becoming muscle memory now. Unapologetic, unbending. After work, I stayed behind. The office emptied slowly, people leaving with the relief of another day done. I waited until the last light flicked off outside my office door. I opened the not yet folder again, and there it was, an email, forwarded by Raven, quiet, always polite, but sharper than she let on. Subject: "She's the one with the watermark originals." It was from Torin. He had known all along. He had the truth. He just chose to ignore it. I sat back, then leaned forward, and started drafting each timestamp, each attachment, every instance he'd chosen to bury my work and claim his role as savior. This time I wasn't waiting. "This is the moment I stop being quiet," I whispered to the screen, and meant every syllable. I woke up before the alarm went off. The city outside was still muted, a pale orange light spilling between the blinds. I sat at my desk with coffee cooling beside me, laptop open, every file lined up in neat, deliberate order. No more loose ends. I created a secure Google Drive folder, titled it in case I'm erased, and began dragging in each piece of evidence: emails, mock-ups, project plans, sorted chronologically like a timeline carved into stone. When I was done, I shared it only with my attorney and my mentor. No one else. I opened a new email, addressed it to HR, and scheduled it for 1 week from now. The last line I typed was, "Silence is compliance. This is my refusal." My finger hovered over schedule for a moment. I pressed it. The email slid away into the future like a locked grenade. I looked at myself in the mirror across the room. "We don't unsee truths once they're lit," I whispered. My reflection stared back, calm but not quiet anymore. By 9 o'clock, I was at the office. The glass walls of the conference room reflected a team already seated, murmuring over coffee. Torrin stood at the head of the table, his laptop projecting a slick, new design pitch onto the screen. I watched the slides flick by, each one ringing familiar like a song I'd written but forgotten. It was my work, rearranged, polished, but mine. He didn't even blink. I stayed seated until he finished his rehearsed ending. "And that's our new direction," he said, clasping his hands like a man who had built something himself. "Could you pull up the original mock-up from 3 months ago?" I asked, my voice steady. He looked at me, then at the others, a flicker of doubt passing over his face. "Why?" "I think it's worth comparing." Before he could answer, I opened my laptop and projected my own slides onto the wall. Time-stamped, watermarked, line by line, design by design. Murmurs rose across the table like a low tide. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't accuse, I just narrated. "Here's the concept sketch, here's the first draft, here's the timestamp showing completion. This is what was presented today." I paused, meeting his eyes. "You didn't forget, you erased. There's a difference." The room fell silent. You could hear the air conditioner hum. Someone at the far end cleared their throat. Torrin's jaw tightened. He closed his laptop and walked out without a word. The door swung shut, louder than it needed to be. I stayed where I was for a beat, then gathered my laptop. A few colleagues avoided looking at me. One whispered to another. But as I walked back to my desk, someone slipped a post-it into my hand. "Took courage. Some of us saw it." I put the note in my pocket. My heart was pounding, but my spine felt straight as steel. And yet, under the steel, there was an ache, a quiet sadness. Why does doing the right thing feel lonelier than silence ever did? I sat at my desk. HR had already scheduled a quick follow-up for later in the week. An invite from the exec team blinked in my inbox. I closed it for now. I needed a moment alone. That evening, I left the office and went home. The apartment was dark except for the glow of my phone on the counter. Missed calls, 3 from unknown numbers, 1 voicemail. I pressed play. A distorted voice filled the room. "Careful where you dig, not everyone buries the past quietly." I stood still. The voice ended. The room was silent again except for my own breathing. This wasn't just Torrin anymore. This was bigger. I walked to the window, looking out at the city, lights shimmering like a field of signals. Somewhere down there, someone thought they could scare me back into silence. They didn't know me. The war had just begun. When I walked into the office that morning, everything felt off. People who usually gave me a nod or a morning suddenly avoided my eyes. The lounge monitor displayed a scrolling email thread, my name bolded, unreliable, overly emotional, not gossip whispered in corners. This was written, deliberate. My hands felt cold on my bag strap. I didn't stop to read faces. I went straight to my desk, sat down, and opened my laptop. The proof folder waited for me like a lifeline, every file lined up with its twin, my originals and the plagiarized versions they were now passing off. Timestamps glared like witnesses. My heart was beating too hard, but my fingers stayed steady. I typed a response to the email thread, calm, factual, nothing more, then closed it. I didn't need to defend myself to every lie, only to the truth. But inside, behind that calm, I felt the anger pressing against my ribs like it wanted out. At lunch, searching for a pen, I found a small locked box pushed to the back of my drawer. I hadn't opened it in years. The tulip tram pin lay on top of a faded family photo, my face blurred at the edges. It wasn't a bad print, it felt like a symbol. Torrin's voice rose up from memory, 17 years old, leaning against the kitchen counter, his words low but sharp. "We let you exist so long as you stay small." My grip tightened around the pin. It wasn't just Kadra improvising this smear. She'd been building this case against me for years, just like Torrin. Erasure was their pattern. Mid-afternoon, on my way to the printer, a senior manager stepped into my path. His tone was mild, but the message wasn't. "You're pushing too hard, Rhaenyra. Are you trying to ruin the team's morale?" I met his eyes. "No, I'm restoring what's mine." He smirked. "People are saying you're unstable after that email." I felt the walls closing in, but I wouldn't shrink. People can believe whatever they're told. Then I walked past him, head high, heart hammering. The hallway stretched out like a test I had to pass. After work, I drove to my mother's house for what she called a reconciliation dinner. Candles flickered, soft music played, but the air was heavy. Kadra sat at the far end, posture relaxed, smile fixed. After dessert, she rose, holding a framed piece of art. My art, designed years ago. "I thought you'd love this," she said sweetly to my mother. "It's one of my favorite things I've created." Mum clapped. "Oh, Kadra, you're so talented." I stayed still, my throat tightened. Kadra's smile sharpened, waiting for me to break. I reached into my bag, took out the tulip tram pin, and set it on the table. That piece was always mine. The room went silent, eyes darted. My mother opened her mouth, but no sound came. I turned and walked toward the door without waiting for a response. That night, back at my apartment, I dropped my keys on the counter and opened my laptop. The login screen blinked. I typed my credentials. "Access denied. Credentials revoked pending review." I stared at the message, fingers hovering above the keyboard. The green light on my backup drive blinked steadily, but everything else felt like it was slipping away. They weren't just taking my work, they were cutting me out of my own life. "They're trying to bury me alive," I whispered into the empty room. I was up before the sun, not restless, clear. Something about silence before the world stirs sharpens everything. I sat at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the fridge keeping time as I opened my laptop. The not yet evidence folder glared back at me. It had grown fat with facts I'd never planned to share. But this time, I wasn't just staring at them. I was preparing. I clicked through the screenshots, date stamps, layered drafts, side by side with Kadra's polished theft. Torrin still hadn't replied to my last 2 messages. I could feel him slipping away, the same way you feel autumn in your bones before the leaves fall. But this wasn't about him anymore. This was about being written out of my own life story. I got dressed with intention. No grays, no subtle prints. I chose red, bold, direct. The tulip tram pin I once kept tucked away was now pinned right over my chest, not to provoke, but to exist visibly without apology. On the way to work, the bus was quiet. People staring into their phones, eyes glazed, coffee in hand. I wasn't planning to read anything, but the headline caught me like a punch. "Design team scandal, whose work is real?" My fingers trembled a second, then clicked. It was a local site, usually more concerned with traffic updates and school closings, but there it was, a company event photo. Blurred faces except for one, Kadra, smiling like she invented sincerity. Behind her, the campaign mural I'd poured months into. And next to it, my own face, smudged out like a glitch in memory. Intentional. I knew it immediately. That kind of selective blur didn't just happen. I scrolled down to the photographer's name, a local freelancer hired through Torrin's PR budget. They weren't just silencing me in the office anymore, they were trying to erase me publicly, but in doing so, they left a trace. I sat back. The cold from the metal seat crept through my coat. I let the article sink in, not with despair, but a pulse of something else. Righteous anger, the kind that wakes you up. By afternoon, I was already standing in the gallery. The party was small, clean wine glasses, polished cheese cubes. Kadra floated through the crowd, all controlled laughter and calculated grace. Torrens stood beside her, his arm a little too stiff around her waist. "This piece," Kadra said, motioning to the center canvas, "is my tribute to family, the roots we come from, the legacy we leave." I stepped forward as she spoke, slow, quiet, no one noticed until the projector behind her lit up. One slide, side by side, my original design on the left, hers on the right, every tweak she made to mask the theft. Now glaring in contrast, a beat of silence, then a sharp inhale from the crowd. Someone whispered, "Wait, that's the same?" Kadra turned, saw it. Her face went pale, then red. Torrens' jaw tightened. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My presence, the truth, the image, it said everything. I turned and walked out. Behind me, murmurs swelled like a wave hitting stone. It was already dark by the time I got home. I kicked off my shoes, set my bag down, reached for the kitchen light. My phone buzzed before I could even touch the switch. New email. No subject. "You published before you were ready." The sender, blank, but the metadata. My skin went cold. Internal server tags from my company. They were watching, digging deeper, and getting sloppy. I stared at the screen, then whispered into the dark kitchen air. I hoped they would be desperate. They're becoming dangerous. I woke to chaos, phone buzzing like it had a heartbeat of its own. I grabbed it off the nightstand, eyes still adjusting, and all I saw were firestorms. Mentions, threads, tags, notifications stacked over each other. Twitter was spinning, LinkedIn had exploded. People were sharing the article from the local news site again, but this time it was global, syndicated, updated. They'd connected the blurred photo to Torrens' PR team and linked Kadra's false claims to the scandal. I sat up, spine straight. Some messages were cruel. Others were sincere, saying things like, "Finally, we see you." One person, a junior designer I barely knew, sent, "I always knew it wasn't her work." I stared at that for a long time, then wrote back, "Thank you for seeing me." Amid the noise, I didn't feel panic. What I felt was clarity. The storm had hit and I was still standing. I got ready like it was a normal workday. But everything had shifted. I wore the tulip tram pin again. This time I didn't look at it for courage. I looked at it like a banner, not a wound, not a relic, a flag. The office was quieter than usual, fewer footsteps, fewer greetings. People glanced, then looked away. Some smiled, tight-lipped, awkward. The ones who had always known but never spoken. That kind of silence. I walked straight through, head high. At the elevator, HR met me. "Can we speak for a moment?" I followed. They offered me temporary relief responsibilities, while leadership reviewed the situation. I said nothing, just nodded. I didn't need their protection. I needed their attention. Outside the conference room, Kadra appeared like a ghost from a burning house, composed, but with that frantic flicker in her eyes. "You think this is justice?" she hissed. "You're turning our family into a circus." I didn't blink. Truth doesn't need drama, you need cover. Someone behind her let out a soft, "Whoa!" She stormed past me, heels stabbing the floor. Later, in a private booth HR provided for privacy and decompression, I pulled up the internal server logs. Footage from the night the leak broke. I found what I was looking for. Kadra's assistant slipping into the design suite, downloading files. His face turned to the camera, clear as daylight. He transferred them to a thumb drive and left. Simple, quiet, caught. I scheduled a live stream, no announcement, just pressed play in the conference room where leadership sat with arms crossed. The video ran, one by one, chairs turned. No one said a word until the final frame. Torin leaned forward, voice rough. "That's not proof of anything." I looked at him, not angry, just done. "You were happy to erase me, but I kept the proof." Kadra's mouth was tight, white knuckles gripping the armrest. No denial, no apology. The CEO cleared his throat. "We'll need time to assess." But they didn't need time, they needed cover. That night I sat at my kitchen table again. No wine, no music, just silence and the soft glow of the screen. An email came in, subject, "Board meeting tomorrow," inside, "Be prepared to explain or be cut off entirely." I leaned back, fingers resting on the keyboard, then reached for the tulip tram pin, fastened it to my shirt. "I won't offer them silence," I said aloud. "I'll give them accountability." The sky was still grey when I pulled into the lot at headquarters. The building was quiet, too early for chatter or footsteps. Security gave me a sharp look as I walked in, badge in hand, my bag heavy on my shoulder. Inside it, every page, every file, every proof I had gathered over these long months. The not yet folder, now full, the USB drive, printed timelines. I paused outside the boardroom door, took one long breath, every slight, every erased line of my name, every late night battle to stay sane. They all converged here. I pinned the tulip tram to my jacket like a war medal. Then I opened the door. A dozen faces looked up, some surprised, some defiant. Others tried to avoid my eyes altogether. I walked to the center of the room, placed my bag on the table and stood straight. The chairman began. "Mr. Torin, you may start." I raised my hand. "I'd like to speak first." My voice was steady. They nodded. I slid the folder across the table. One by one, I laid out the evidence, time-stamped files, the leaked email chain, the internal footage showing Kadra's assistant moving my work to their contacts. Slide by slide, the truth became undeniable. On the screen, my original designs. Next to them, the copied versions. Kadra shifted in her chair, fingers fidgeting. Torin tried to cut in. "This is all circumstantial." I turned to him just loud enough. "I never asked for credit. I asked for truth." Silence. The chairman cleared his throat, eyes on Torin. "Your response?" He stumbled, muttered about miscommunications and team misunderstandings, but there was nothing left to hide behind. Kadra stayed silent, eyes darting around the room, searching for a lifeline. A director spoke up. "This is betrayal dressed up as leadership." Another nodded. "We can't allow this." The chairman folded his hands. "Effective immediately, Mr. Torin. You're removed from head of creative projects. Ms. Kadra, you're suspended pending review." There was a hush, then a few soft claps from the far end of the table. It wasn't applause, it was acknowledgement of a shift. Someone said, "Rhaenyra, will you take over the projects?" I didn't answer right away, just met their eyes, then said quietly, "I'll take them and I'll rebuild them right." After the meeting, I walked into the foyer. My mother was there, eyes wet. She stepped forward, voice trembling. You did this." I pressed the pin into her hand. "You carried my name for years. Now let's get it right." She nodded, couldn't speak. I turned to the glass wall, caught my own reflection. Stronger, not bitter, just changed. That night I went back to my office, packed every photo, every award, every file. No one came to stop me. The last item on the shelf was the tram pin, sitting alone. I picked it up, held it over my heart. "This victory isn't over," I whispered. "It's just beginning." I shut off the lights, closed the door, and walked away without looking back.